Hello everybody, it is your boy GZTV back with another video, and in this video we are here. I know you guys were expecting me to get the Bond video up and running, but we are here to review kind of just a random movie I had on my agenda. We have American Gangster, and obviously it's disrespectful to call it a random movie. It's probably one of the best gangster movies I've ever seen from 2007, and there are certain gangster movies that everybody talks about. Goodfellas, Scarface, Casino, The Godfather, Heat, but somehow American Gangster feels like one of those movies that doesn't get brought up enough when people talk about the absolute elite of the genre. And after finally sitting down and watching it for the first time in full, maybe I saw snippets of it as a kid or something, in passing, this is the first time I'm actually sitting down analyzing it for the channel. I understand why people hold this movie in such high regard. I mean, Ridley Scott is an amazing director, and this is one of their best work. Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, Josh Brolin, Idris Elba, an incredible soundtrack, and one of the coolest cat and mouse stories probably ever. From a formulaic standpoint, it does its job. This movie isn't just another gangster film, it is almost two movies in one, following two different character stories, and I've never really seen a gangster movie pull off two protagonists, but they do it. One side follows the rise of Frank Lucas, and the other follows Richie Roberts trying to bring him down, and somehow Ridley Scott makes a nearly 3-hour movie feel completely justified with quite a tale we have here, so let's get into it. There's not going to be a whole lot to say in this video because, it is a gangster movie, it follows a lot of the tropes, but getting into what happens. After the death of Harlem Kingpin Bumpy Johnson, Frank Lucas rises from being his driver to building one of the biggest heroin empires in America through a connection with Vietnam and his famous blue magic product. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here in a second, but there's all sorts of things that kind of go into this movie that I very much appreciate. Now, obviously, the tie-in with Vietnam, not something I was super aware of with the Vietnam War causing an opioid epidemic among soldiers. I think that is a really cool thing that this movie explores. Hopefully you guys like my shirt. The blue magic, obviously heroin just being a thing and it being pure and it coming from Vietnam, and just the typical gangster rags to riches American dream story is what you kind of get here. He goes from a driver to being one of the biggest gangsters in America. Meanwhile, honest detective Richie Roberts attempts to expose not only Frank's operation, but the massive corruption spreading throughout the New York Police Department. And I don't know if that was a big thing. I don't know if they're kind of just glorifying that, the whole bribery scene with police officers getting drug drops and money from gangsters, but the result is one of the most compelling crime stories of the 2000s. That I know is damn sure, and we're going to get into why. Getting into the good, obviously Denzel Washington is absolutely unbelievable. He is one of the best African-American actors in modern history, probably of the history of Hollywood. Obviously, he brings a lot. He brings some swagger to this Frank Lucas character who has been so many times referenced in pop culture. He has the intelligence, he has style and authority. He's able to run this operation without getting in over his head and becoming egotistical. Now, him bringing his family into the fold was a dumb decision, and that is what ultimately led to his demise, but other than that, he knew what the fuck he was doing, and Denzel plays him with such confidence that you understand why everyone fears, respects him, reveres him in the projects and in these low-down neighborhoods and stuff. He's kind of like a black Tony Soprano. Now, obviously, they differ in a lot of ways. Tony Soprano very much more of an immediate family man. He had a wife and kids to go home to. That's not really the case for Frank Lucas, but just the way he carries himself, very similar. Hard-nosed, cold, ruthless, absolutely fascinating to watch, and that is kind of just why these gangster movies work so well, is because you're so interested in following all these characters, and a lot of these characters have different kind of personalities, and there's a lot of uniqueness in the genre, which is why it's probably a lot of people's favorite genre out there. I wasn't necessarily rooting for Frank because obviously the guy is poisoning communities and shooting people in broad daylight. He is an A-list asshole, but just like Tony Soprano or Walter White, you're absolutely captivated. Obviously I was very much more rooting for Walter White and maybe even Tony Soprano because I just like the character more, but he's still a piece of shit. Him causing overdoses, probably being kind of indirectly responsible for that, and his old idea of uptaking the drug empire, because they could have just let it rest with Bumpy Johnson, but no. Frank Lucas needs this social status, he picks it up, and naturally he goes along with it. One of the best scenes in the movie is the famous execution of broad daylight. I think it was Tango's death, who's played by Idris Elba. Frank doesn't care who sees him. People are scattering, people are screaming in a fucking frenzy, they don't know what the hell they just witnessed. He doesn't give a fuck. He's like, yeah, oh, what are you gonna do, shoot me in front of these people? I shorted you your money. He's like, 20%, shoots him in the head, grabs out of his pocket, puts it in a jar. He's a fucking badass. Now, obviously, he's not as badass as some of the other gangsters we've seen in movies before. Scenes like that really give this movie a name, really give this movie some iconicness to it, and I love it. The power he possesses was absolutely absolutely terrifying. And I think that is kind of the unique thing with gangster movies and how they deal with law enforcement, because these people have so much power. These people are so dangerous. Like, if you were a police officer inherently, you'd want to be like, yeah, let's put them away as soon as possible, get this shit off the fucking streets. But it's like, you have to be careful because shit's gonna explode. They could flee, you could imprison them without reasonable cause, and they could get out of that with a proper lawyer. It's crazy. And Russell Crowe is equally fantastic because of that, because of how he handles this police officer detective character. And honestly, that's what surprised me the most. I don't even think Denzel Washington carries this movie. Now, there's some like black culture and kind of like black bias with that, because this movie was made for the black culture and achieving the American dream, and there's all sorts of social commentary that comes with that. But Russell Crowe certainly holds his own in this film, and I absolutely respect it. Richie Roberts is one of the few genuinely honest people in the film. Returning that $1 million found in the trunk immediately tells you what kind of man he is, just kind of plays by the book. And his investigation to follow that throughout the movie was absolutely fascinating. And I know I could probably make this video 20 to 30 minutes long if I wanted to, but I'm gonna spare you guys a little bit because I like to be concise with my reviews. But him piecing together clues and able to track shipments, fighting connections with like the military plane that the drugs were being hauled in on, watching the puzzle slowly come together. I love the dual protagonist structure and them going to the military base, tearing the plane apart, looking on the walls, looking for shipments, looking in dead soldiers' coffins, looking for shipments under their arms and crazy shit like that. This guy is doing this by the book, but also by any means necessary. The man has a fucking warrant. He's gonna look at every nook and cranny of this operation. And Frank and Richie barely interact until the end, but because of that, every encounter they do have feels absolutely important, and it is absolutely worth it, because it says in the poster, you have 2 Academy Award winning actors here playing some of their best roles probably in their entire career, if I'm being honest with you. Their conversations near the end of the movie are fantastic. You know, they're sitting in like the precinct, I think it is, and talking to each other, going over like what's happening with this. It's an interrogation as well as like a collaboration between the two. It is such a cool moment. There's tension, but there's also respect. And obviously they disagree with each other. Some of them want 2 different things. Now, obviously, Denzel Washington's character doesn't want to go to prison at all, and Russell Crowe would rather never see him on the streets again. But both men recognize something in the other. Frank realizes Richie isn't a corrupt cop, and that these cops that got indicted and stuff are nothing like him. And Richie realizes Frank isn't like everyone else he's chasing. He's not this scumbag, even though kind of is a scumbag. He has a little bit more respect. He's a little bit more mature than some of the guys that they were tracked down by the law enforcement. So they realize that in each other, and they realize they can come together, not necessarily have a friendship, but at least like a kinship of some sort. And Ridley Scott absolutely nails the atmosphere that comes with everything. Comes with the style of this movie. This movie feels like the 1970s. The whole time I was watching this movie, I forgot this movie didn't even come out 2 decades ago. It's a pretty young movie, and it is one of the last great gangster films that we have gotten, and it's insane to think that. Obviously, The Departed was pretty good as well, but the suits, the cars, the clubs, the soundtrack, the whole movie is just classy. It is done to a T. So there you have it. I honestly forgot this movie came out so recently. Watching Frank build blue magic as well was fantastic. Again, the rags to riches story that this thing paints is absolutely wonderful. And I love everything that comes with it. You know, them nailing everything down. The Vietnam angle and him having his military connections. It's one of his cousins, I believe, that lives out in Vietnam, and he was a soldier and he knows these people. Vietnam is the land of the opioids. That's why the motherfuckers were up in trees apparently, because they sold the shit, they distributed it, they produced it, and in turn they got fucking hooked on their own shit. So if the Vietnamese were going into wars, guns fucking ablazing with it, like a chicken with their heads cut off because of the shit they made. Off of a flower, by the way. The military connections were great. I mean, obviously the operation itself, seeing the trucks come in and that's how they catch them. Going to the projects in this very fucked up area and seeing all the junkies laying around, the homeless people, the naked women helping make the drugs. It's insane. It's like some GTA shit. It's wild. Seeing him move his family from poverty into luxury, the whole scene where he goes to North Carolina into the countryside and moves them to this White House looking fucking mansion. Is this where George Washington lived? It looks like Mount Vernon. This shit looks insane. His brother's joining the business and them kind of having be fronting a business, you know, like changing tires and doing all these different services for rich people. As black people, they wouldn't suspect anything of it. It all made for a really compelling rise to power. And speaking of supporting performances, I'm almost done, I promise. There's a lot to talk about though. Josh Brolin as Trubo is an absolute piece of garbage, but he is one of the best side characters I've seen in a gangster film. The guy is fantastic, and obviously Josh Brolin, we know him from Thanos. More recently, he was in the Weapons film. He's been in so many movies, but I mean that as a compliment. Josh Brolin plays such a good, snotty, sleazy, in the end, corrupt detective. It's fucking great. He kills his fucking dog, and they lift it up and find the money, obviously. He's slapping Frank's girl, who's this Puerto Rican who kind of just gets dragged into the world, has nothing to do with it. You know, being corrupt to the core. He even took the bribes. He might actually be more hateable than Frank himself, which I don't know how that was possible, but all the twists and how it culminated in the end allowed that to happen. Also, Idris Elba was pretty awesome for the short amounts that he appeared, and I love seeing guys like Common, RZA, and T.I. involved because this movie really embraces black culture and in turn hip-hop culture, and I think Jay-Z even contributed to the soundtrack if I'm not mistaken, but that was a perfect fit. This movie is awesome. Getting into the bad, there's only a couple of things I could really criticize this movie for. I don't really think the movie criticizes Frank enough. I don't really think this movie does the greatest job at painting him as a bad guy or anything. Now, maybe that wasn't the purpose. That's fine, I guess, but the movie almost glorifies him and look at this guy's house. Look, he's casually buying these grand pianos and he's shooting people without hardly any consequence. The only consequence he gets is 15 years in prison for carrying on Bumpy Johnson's legacy. They see he's $250 million from this fucking thing and he got 15 years of prison? Are you serious? I don't even know what that equates to. What is that? Each year is $5 million of drugs a year each? Are you serious? What are we doing here, man? And again, that is intentional maybe, but there are moments where you almost forget how awful some of his actions really are and you almost find yourself in a toxic sense supporting him. And I think Breaking Bad was a little better at that because at least with Walter White, you know, he's fighting cancer. He doesn't have much left on this earth and he wants to like make his last days count, leave something for his family. I don't think Frank Lucas really gets that type of backstory, so it kind of results in you almost blindly rooting for a guy just because he's this criminal badass and he's in a gangster movie and it's like, oh, I gotta root for the gangsters. And at least with Tony Soprano, he has a wife and kids and all of this stuff and he's just trying to make a living and he helps other people. Frank, I don't know if he really deserves the praise he gets, but naturally you're gonna love him because of just how much swagger he has. And Richie's personal life and divorce just kind of getting onto the other side of the coin also didn't hit as hard for me as I think the movie intended. I think that's fine, but that didn't really affect anything. It was almost like casually, oh, we can't do this, we can't have our son around you, you live a dangerous lifestyle, you chase down some of the most dangerous people in the world, we can't do it, divorce, boom, gone. There's no depression, there's no nothing, he's back to fighting crime. But compared to everything involving Frank, it just wasn't nearly as compelling. I think his character, if he went through more turmoil, would have made it, in turn, a better movie. But that's all I gotta say. And while I liked the ending, I talked about it a little bit in the good, I almost wish we got a sequel. I think we were kind of shortchanged of some things in the end when they kind of discussed where the characters were going, what direction they went in, the fate of everybody. You know how they do it with the text at the end of movies. I always think that's been kind of lazy because if you have intent on closing out a character, wouldn't you want to build some story to at least make that more legible or something? Because why the fuck, after all of this, would Richie quit his job to become a defense attorney and instantly pick up Frank Lucas as a client? Isn't that a little weird? Watching Richie defend Frank in court and take down the corrupt cops could have been a movie all by itself. I mean, seriously, they could have made a sequel to this and they could have ended it on that, getting the sentence reduced to 15 and the whole movie just be a courtroom drama. That would have been fucking insane. I would have loved that, but whatever. I guess we can't get everything. Getting into the okay, this is kind of something I'm acknowledging, but the runtime is long. The movie is long. If you're not into long movies, you're not going to like this. And there are some long movies, you know, given some Avatar movies, some Dune movies that I have not been a super big fan of, but honestly, at nearly 3 hours, gangster movies almost have to be. I think that kind of comes with the genre. If you don't like long movies, you're most likely not going to like gangster films, because think about the fucking Godfather. Those movies are almost like 10 hours total of runtime. It's insane. But you need time for the rise, the excess, the betrayals, the paranoia, the ultimate collapse of the empire, and I think American Gangster earns its runtime. I think there's enough going on. Obviously, not every scene is explosive or emotional, but the movie always feels important. It always feels like there's something fun going on, and I really appreciate that. There's even a love interest, although it's kind of forced, and I don't really care to touch upon it in here. And his relationship with his mother, like, don't shoot cops, you know, we don't do that. And all the run-ins with the law, all of this stuff, you almost forget what happens in this movie sometimes because there's just so much fucking jam-packed, even for 2.5 hours. But I love it. I think naturally it progresses, the good guys win, and we all go home. Getting into my review, American Gangster is probably the best gangster movie of the 21st century. I just have to put it out there. It is absolutely legendary. I mean, it isn't quite Goodfellas or Scarface, you know, those movies I think came out in the 20th century, but I'd honestly put it above movies like The Departed, Heat, Casino. Obviously, there's been so many good gangster films that have come out in the past, but Denzel Washington gives one of my favorite performances of his career. Russell Crowe is fantastic. Ridley Scott delivers one of his best best films, and the atmosphere, story, and performances combine to create something that feels epic without ever becoming overwhelming. This isn't a comfort movie, it's not something I'd throw on every month, but it's absolutely a movie I'll revisit because this is what gangster movies are supposed to be. Stylish, intelligent, layered, entertaining, and full of unforgettable performances. This is one of the best gangster movies ever made, and this is one of Ridley Scott's finest achievements and quite a filmography. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. And a lot of the stuff in this movie, a lot of the performances, a lot of the elements are not necessarily the best ever, like critically acclaimed consensus to be so, but they're some of my favorites in this entire genre, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I obviously have my James Bond box set still coming in the mail, so stay tuned because after this movie review, we're gonna jump right on that shit. We're gonna get into more action, we're gonna get into more spy, maybe some more crime with those 5 movies. It's gonna be a blast. And after those, I'm gonna go to theaters to see Supergirl, and then George of the Jungle, watch out for that sequel, is coming down the pipeline. So for all of you guys that asked for it, I'm delivering. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. As always, it's been your boy GZTV. I'm recording this an hour before I'm scheduled to hop on stream and finish my level 40 grind for Mr. MJ. And then I'm going to be probably streaming 007 First Light for the rest of the night because I just want to get the goddamn game done and have the movies to watch alongside of it. So, peace.